Welcome into the M2M podcast. I'm Paul Yeager at the Iowa State Fair. Iowa Secretary of Ag Mike Naig, which I believe now you have earned designation as most frequent guest. I think I said that to you last year when you were on.
Very good.
We're at the fair. Last year I dang near tried to end both of us in front of the garbage truck. I apologize for that. Thank you for doing this again.
Well, but you've given me assurances that given the remedial driving courses that you took this year, that's a joke, that you could be able to do it this year. It meant a lot to me that I made the blooper reel of the fair, and that was really a highlight of my year.
I think that was somebody saw or heard that video existed and just wanted to poke me a little bit.
The garbage truck and the fact that we were in the rain and in the sun. And we had all of Iowa weather that can occur during the Iowa State Fair during the time that we were on the golf cart.
You at the State Fair, I asked you last year about urban and rural. Okay, we're outside the dairy barn right now.
I'm here a fair amount.
Well, exactly. But do you feel more comfortable if I go around the backside through the barns, or do you feel comfortable enough going through all the people?
Well, either way, honestly. I love to get, of course, I want to see all the cattle, and I want to see the kids, and I love that. But it's always entertaining to go through the people, you know.
It is. That's a word. That's a word we'll use. I think we're going to start and go behind the barns.
Yes. Well, let's ease into this.
You know what?
We're going to
go into
here we go.
But we're not going to be in it very long.
It's already started.
I told everyone that there's no state patrol to guide us, so
there is no escort here. Yeah.
We talked in December, and HPAI was big.
Yeah.
We were coming up into a legislative session where China foreign land ownership was big. Then we had HPAI get into dairy cows. Then we had all these things. What's been the biggest story of 24 in agriculture for Iowa farmers this year?
Well, I think as you sit here today, and we're thinking about it's really about the softness that we're starting to see in the ag economy, and of course of late, you've got commodity prices, but then you've also got a situation where you're seeing some pretty high-profile layoffs. And I spend a lot of time talking to folks outside of the agriculture industry and saying but when profitability is under pressure at the farm gate, that has implications on other things. So I do think that overall state of our economy, what's happening with inflation, what's happening with real inflation and people's pocketbooks and the kitchen table, and then how is that playing out across ag, I think that has to be one of the major storylines of the year. But I think high-path avian influenza and the way it has affected the dairy industry this year really is something that was novel. We'd of course been dealing with high-path in poultry for a couple of years.
Yeah.
But the fact that we had a spillover event into dairy, I think is something that, frankly, it's still something that we're going to have to come to terms with here throughout the rest of the year.
It's something I think I asked you, and it still, I would imagine, holds true, because when you have year to year, you have familiar things that you have learned. This works, this doesn't, this works. Then the dairy people come calling, which you're like, here, I don't even have to dust off that playbook. Unfortunately, it's been used so much.
Yeah, we say this all the time, that we sort of tongue-in-cheek, but we wish we weren't good at dealing with high-path. But I have to say that it really was. It reminds me, though, of going through 2015. It was when we first dealt with a massive outbreak. It was the largest animal disease outbreak in our history at that time, and the poultry industry had to go through this whole exercise of they thought they had good biosecurity, but then they had to learn that what were the ways that they could enhance that, and we have then seen this dramatic improvement in what they've done and investments that the poultry industry made. I see the dairy industry sort of having to come to terms with some of that themselves, which is how do animals move, how do you have biosecurity around feed ingredients on the farm, all those types of things. So in that way, it's different. But it's sort of the same playbook, maybe that was all the way back to 2015.
When Naomi Bloom comes on the TV show, she always gives us an update, very good update on dairy. Yeah. And we know that they've already seen lower herds, culling of herds, prior to the outbreak. But they had actually started to have some prices start to stabilize.
Really, true.
And to have your dairy farmers, I mean, you think of the ones in Northeast Iowa and then Northwest Iowa having to deal with this. How come we haven't, I think you were asked this in Iowa Press, why are we not seeing it from Northwest Iowa move over to Northeast Iowa?
So a couple things. One is there really hasn't been, I wouldn't say we haven't ordered mandatory testing. So I think some of this is this has been wider spread, I would argue, or I would suppose. It's been wider spread across this country than just the states that have confirmed positives. Let me say it that way.
Sure.
But it is true that in Iowa, you've really got Northwest Iowa and Northeast Iowa are fairly distinct when it comes to the type of operations that we have. You tend to have larger operations in Northwest and smaller in the Northeast, and there aren't a lot of connections between those two systems. And so I think it is logical that you could have a wall between those. But I do think we also saw, we had some poultry cases, some positive poultry farms in Northwest Iowa, and that sort of triggered the whole impetus to look around those poultry sites in order to determine what was going on in dairy. I mean, in Iowa, if we were just a dairy state, we would manage it like just a dairy issue.
I get it, yeah.
We are a swine, beef, dairy, poultry, turkey state. And we do all this in really close proximity to each other. So we don't have the luxury in Iowa of treating this like one species or another. We really do have to look at this across species, across our whole agriculture. And I think that's why you're seeing us do some things a little bit differently than maybe what you've seen in some other states.
I didn't know you were going to have security follow us. There was a black SUV right behind us. So is that what that was about? Is you were worried still?
Yeah, we're just. I think they've let us go now. You've proven yourself.
Oh, okay.
You've proven yourself.
He's not putting them into traffic. Low commodity prices. Yeah. I'm going to guess you're going to hear, how come corn starts with a 3? How come beans are going to start with a 9? This is simple economics at work now. We're really good at growing grain.
We are.
We are going to have an oversupply. We have USDA that's trying to balance certain things in the eyes of the conspiracy theorists of what USDA is trying to do. How do you balance what can you do to help that producer who is seeing 3s and 9s in front of their big number?
Look, first of all, we know that, I would say I'm no economist, but the only thing I can tell you about the agriculture economy is that it's cyclical. Of course, how long are the cycles and how quickly do they cycle back? Those are things that people get paid a lot of money to have opinions about. But the fact is that here we are. We've come off of 4 years of drought. We had some amazing crops during that time, and now we're seeing significant, in some cases too much rainfall, but we've got rainfall. We've got a mountain of corn out here. What I look about in the big picture, right? This is why you need to have risk management tools for farmers. This is why farm bills are important. Yeah. This is why getting a new farm bill across the line is important. But it is also why we have to continue to think about, I figure at the core of my job is the need to try to increase demand for our products, the things we grow here, but also to increase the value of the things that we do. For us, how can we use more corn and soybeans here? Yeah. How about more crush capacity? How about more ethanol grind? But if you're going to do those things, then you need policies that will allow us to increase higher blends of ethanol. What about sustainable aviation fuel? Those aren't near-term fixes by any means. You still have this corn.
Those are several administration
piles, but you have to be thinking. But of course, that's, I would argue, why you don't lose your focus on those things. That's why you should be focusing on those things all the time. And so using more of what we grow here, adding value here, and then trade. We are going to continue to promote and figure out how to do trade in a way that's fair and advantageous to us in this country.
You have an elected party. You're elected as a member of a party, but you do serve the whole state. There is a thought that the current administration is just tougher than the previous on tariffs, that if the former gets back into the current, we're going to see it continued. China has already said they're not super interested in U.S. grain. How's that keep you up at night?
Well, so as it relates to, this absolutely is part of a national conversation and should be on the election. Of course, the current administration, Biden administration, has essentially continued the Trump administration policies when it comes to China and tariffs. We grow more here than we consume. Yeah. The ability to export that, to find markets, to help us drive value for these products is critically important, and it must be a key component, going forward. Now, but that's not to say that just every trade agreement is a good one all the way around, right? You can write a really bad free trade agreement. We shouldn't give up on the idea that we can write trade agreements that are both, that benefit both parties and that do allow us to move ag products around the world. We need that. Tariffs, most folks will tell you, in and of themselves, most people don't like them. They're disruptive things that we don't know that, we don't think that they're the right way to go. However, if tariffs can be used as a tool, as part of a larger strategy, like we saw used during the Trump administration round one, which was where there was this larger China policy that resulted in knocking down some of the non-tariff barriers, phase 1 and phase 2 trade agreements. It's got to be part of a larger equation, not just a single usage. That's the end all be all.
Do you get the sense that you are going to hear? I mean, let's face it, those who aren't on the farm might not recognize who you are. And what?
Welcome to the fair.
Welcome to the fair. That is the story of our life here. I was going to pull off into the shade there, but we'll keep going. I might just get in front of another board
member.
If
Mike comes back around, just get out of the way.
Do you get the sense that those who don't know necessarily that you're the Secretary of Ag are going to wonder and say to you, well, let's just grow less. We won't have as big of a supply.
Yeah.
Let's put CRP into the land.
Yeah.
Or let's take these cattle that are methane but I had one market analyst tell me a couple weeks ago, well, if you do that, we had a question about CRP, and he said, if I just secede all of our business to Brazil, that's what would happen.
Yeah.
Is that fair?
Look, I look in my role, and I come from, I farm, I come from rural Iowa. Mm-hmm. I travel all across this state. Agriculture drives our economy. Agriculture is at the heart of this country. Our food and agriculture security, ag security, food security equals national security, economic security. You can't have any of those conversations until you have food security at its core. If we outsource our food production to someone else, you're seeing other parts of the world do this. Europe, watch what's happening. As they flat out declare war on their agriculture, their productivity is going to decline. They're going to rely on other parts of the world to supply them with the things they need. Mm-hmm. In the long run, those are terrible things from a national security standpoint, but they hollow out communities all across the country. And so, to me, it's a non-starter. We must remain productive. We can remain productive. And then add markets. Add demand,
value,
and add value.
Value is always the part of it.
Well, look, so I've always said, look, we're Iowa #1 in corn production, #2 in soybean production. But selling those crops at their commodity price is not what drives value to our economy. It is the fact that we feed it to livestock. We are the #1 ethanol producing state. We think there's a huge upside for sustainable aviation fuel.
Yeah.
The new ethanol is actually ethanol. It's the way that we add value and then serve that agriculture. That's what really drives our economy.
I had a conversation with a younger farmer who has switched to organic. Mm-hmm. He has struggled here for a couple of years. Do you anticipate that those who have gone that route might have better roads ahead because their product is different?
Well, I do. I think there's, it's interesting around organic versus just and organic and local and specialty and all kinds of things that can be done to add value direct to consumer. Folks are generally wanting to shop local.
Yeah.
That doesn't automatically translate into demand for organic specifically, but I do believe, and we've launched a new brand here in Iowa, Choose Iowa. It's our branded program for Iowa grown, Iowa made, Iowa raised products. I think it's a huge opportunity. Consumers are looking for these things. Farmers are looking for ways to diversify and add value, capture more margin. And I do think that there's a bright future for that in particular. And we all benefit from that. There's another added thing here. By the way,
I'm going to give you this farmer's number. You can text him.
I love it.
He's going to need to hear it.
Let's talk. And at the end, by the way, more people know more about where their food comes from, and that is a good thing.
As we close here at the fair, we opened the fair, but as we close here this conversation, you get to every corner.
Yeah.
You see the farmers markets. You see people excited. Yeah, you don't have quite the dairy that you did. Poultry isn't quite here like it has been.
Yeah.
It's still a time to celebrate this year, right? In 24?
Oh, it is. And in fact, we've had some tough times this year. You think of tornadoes and floods and a softening economy, but this is a time to look at the historical arc of all this. Next week, later in the week, next week, the second week of the fair, we will have the Century and Heritage Farm Awards. 439 families will be recognized with either a Century or Heritage Farm Award. A family that's had a farm in their family for 100 or 150 years. And that's the kind of perspective that I think we need to have. This fair's been around for 170 plus years, right? There's been good years and bad years. There's been great markets and tough markets, world wars, pandemics, any combination of those things imaginable. And yet there's going to be 439 families that walk across the stage. Now, some of those families might have had the worst year in that whole record this year.
Possible.
And I was on a Century farm that was completely destroyed by a tornado earlier this summer. And the comment that stuck with me was, well, we're going to turn the page and start a new chapter. The story of that farm is not over. It's a new chapter, to be sure, and it'll look a lot different. But that's the kind of perspective that I think we need to have. So that's why you can still show up at the Great Iowa State Fair and enjoy yourself and remember the bigger perspective of things. And also dedicate ourselves to making sure that that people are able to sit here 100 years from now and have these kinds of conversations, and that we'll be still driving strong here in the state of Iowa. That's what we need to be thinking about.
Really? You had to bring driving up at the end.
Yeah.
Come on. You have all the words. Appreciate your time, Mike Naig. Thank you. Have fun at the fair this week.
You too.
We the next couple of episodes are going to be live market-to-market podcasts. We're going to be at the Iowa Pork Producers and the Cattlemen. So by the time you see this, we'll have already been at the Pork Producers, but the Cattlemen's will be there next Thursday. So if you are coming to the State Fair, enjoy. Mike Naig, thank you so much for watching, or for listening, talking, and surviving this year.
We did it.
We did it. We'll see you next time.